What's going on, folks? Ted from Nerd Immersion here, and as we are starting to run out of time to fill out the survey for the newest Unearthed Arcana, I figured I would take the time to go through and fill out the survey like I typically do, and kind of give you my feedback. This is one more time to think through what we had in the Mystic subclasses, provide the feedback that I feel is relevant, and then maybe, seeing me do it, sometimes people like to go along through and edit and put in their information as they get a chance to, as I'm doing it. Or sometimes this is just a trigger to remind you that, hey, if you don't provide feedback, your feedback can't be integrated or at least taken into consideration without, submitting it. So anyway, let's go ahead and dive into that. If you like this kind of content or any of the other content that I do here on the channel, go ahead and click that subscribe button. And you know what? Change it up. Feel free to share a video of mine with a friend, whether it's short form content or long form. Anything you do helps. All right, so let's show you how to get access to this survey. So first thing you're going to do is go to D&D Beyond. You're going to want to go to your library, and then you can see Unearthed Arcana right here. You click that, it'll take you to this page, and then you'll click Mystic Subclasses, it'll take you to this page. And you can scroll down and see an option for downloading the PDF, so you can actually see what's being referenced here, or this link here to take the survey. So I have it open here so we can go back and reference if they're referencing specific abilities, and then obviously the survey itself. So you're going to go ahead and start by filling out your age. Then it's going to say, would you like to rate this? And in this instance, we're going to say yes. And it says, what's the first edition of D&D that you played? Mine is third edition. And then it gives you a little rundown of how this works. So it says they use the following scale. Green means go. Rating a feature as green means you like it as written or with tweaks. I don't particularly love this system, if I'm being honest, because there's so much leeway in the sort of red, yellow, green color scale. So it says green means go. Rating a feature as green means you like it as written or with tweaks. Well, what does with tweaks mean? I would love a little bit more definition, if you're listening, Wizards of the Coast, on what that, what constitutes a tweak. Because I might rate something yellow because I think it needs significant change, but perhaps what I deem as significant change, you deem as a tweak. So I think a little bit of information to give us quantification. And I would love if you could just take an older thing, something that's already been submitted, and maybe even that subclass or whatever it is has come out and been released. If you could take the time to showcase us a video or an article that says, okay, we wanted to talk about this feature here for this subclass, and here's an instance in where it was voted green, and then this is what we show as a tweak that we made to it versus this is where we think it's, give us quantification, because yellow means slow down. A yellow rating means you'd like more significant changes to the feature. Again, what constitutes significant change? What constitutes a tweak? And then red means stop. Rating a feature as red means you don't like the feature as presented. Again, I think you can see sort of the degree of vaguity here, right? Because you don't like the feature as presented. Well, I might not like the feature as presented, but I also might like it more with significant changes. So how do I distinguish between I don't like what I see or I like it if it had more changes? In theory, they kind of mean the same thing, right? Like, unless I'm just like, I want to nuke this feature entirely, and I don't want to see it come back. But in the nature of how game design works, right, how often do I want to nuke something entirely, or can it just be like, hey, let's tweak it a little bit or adjust it in some way, and then it will work? And it's that nuance of what is I don't like it at all, or what is I like it with significant changes. You know what I mean? So either way, let's go ahead and keep going. Okay, so which sections of the Unearthed Arcana are you interested in providing feedback for? I think this is new, because normally it lets you just go, you do one, and it says, do you want to provide feedback on it? And then it says, okay, do you want to provide feedback on the next one? And it would force you to go through all of it. So I actually really like this adjustment, because if you don't actually care to give feedback on some of these, you could just say, I only want to give feedback on the Warrior, the Mystic Arts Monk. Check that one. And then in theory, it should have you not cover all the other ones. This is going to come down to, like, in theory, I could say, I don't really want to review the Magic Stealer Rogue because I really like the Magic Stealer Rogue, other than the name. But I also want to review it because I want to give the commendation of how much I do like it. So you'll have to grapple with what works the best for you, but I'm going to go ahead and check all of them because I would like to give some feedback on all of them, whether positive or negative. Okay, next. So, have I play tested the Warrior, the Mystic Arts Monk? No, unfortunately. I wish I had an opportunity to play test these things. And that's actually something I'd like to bring up to all of you. How do you guys go if you are lucky enough to get a chance to playtest these? Because remember, our playtest window for these to provide feedback on them is a very short time frame, right? It's about a week or two from the release of the Unearthed Arcana. It's about a week later, the survey comes out, and then about a week after that, the survey closes. So, do you guys who do get a chance to playtest these things in that 2 to 3 week time frame, maybe a month if we're lucky? Do you guys have like a group dedicated to playtest this? And if you do, what kind of paces do you put it through? Because I actually would really like to do this. And it's something I'm thinking about attempting to try to find a way to do in some form. Whether it's streamed or not, or whether it's recorded or we talk about it after the fact, I would very much like to do this. So I can try to, and whether I'm running the session or playing in the session, try to actually give these Unearthed Arcana their true test. Because, so like the way a lot of this would work, in my opinion, and the way I end up having to do it is like, I might really like an Unearthed Arcana, and if I have a new campaign that I'm playing in or starting, somebody might say, ooh, can I play the Mystic Arts Monk, right? And I say, sure. And now they're playtesting the Mystic Arts Monk in my ongoing game. However, the playtest feedback period has already ended. So, like, they're still giving you playtest feedback over time, which is good, but they won't be able to give it back in a formal setting because the formal window for feedback is gone. Now, they also might be able to grapple with what it looks like if it comes out in another Unearthed Arcana, and that's ideally the best situation. Like, let's say they're playing it in a campaign that I start next week, and they get 2 or 3 weeks with it in play. I get to see it from a DM, they get to see it from a player perspective, and then 2 months from now, they release, Mystic Subclasses version 2. And now they've gone and done sweeping updates based on the first round of feedback. And now they say, ooh, let me update to the newest version of that and let me see how I feel. The closest example I got to this was during the 2024 rework timeframe. I was playing in a very on-again, off-again campaign with not a ton of consistency of testing out the Thief Rogue in that time period. And I don't really consider that truly sitting down and playing a rogue because I had no degree of consistency with that game. I was very much like we'd play once every couple of months, so it didn't matter. But we would update to the newest Unearthed Arcana, and when we did that, I could see the difference from what was in the previous one and actually comment on it when the new survey would come out, which was good. But that was a much longer window, whereas we have, again, as I've stated here, about 2 weeks to do so. So I'm just curious what you guys do if you're able to play test and how you go about structuring that. All right. Overall, how do I feel about the Warrior of the Mystic Arts? Green, I'd like the Warrior of the Mystic Arts as written with some tweaks. Yellow, I like it, but with significant changes. Red, I don't like it, don't know, not sure. Again, this kind of goes back to the point I was making earlier. I don't want to say that I don't like it, because I do appreciate the concept of what it's trying to do. Now, I went over this pretty in depth in a couple of videos on my channel talking about it. Do those constitute tweaks or do those constitute significant changes? I don't know because I don't have what would be great, as I said, would be an example showcasing both. And this is going to be me once again beseeching you, Wizards of the Coast, please, even if it's not tied to something, even if you make up a hypothetical or use one of these as an example. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at, I don't know, the level 6 feature here. Mystic Focus or Mystic Fighting style. Let's go level 11 centered focus, right? When you use a focus point to do Flurry of Blows, Patient Defense, or Step of the Wind, you have advantage on any saving throw you make to maintain concentration until the start of your next turn. Take that example, post it at the top, and then I want you, using your green, yellow, and red system, to tell me what an example of a tweak under the green system would be. Tell me what a significant change under the yellow system would be. And then in theory, the red system would be, I don't want this feature at all, right? But show me that so that I can give you the feedback that you want. Because I want to give you the best constructive criticism and useful feedback that I can. But if I don't know how to structure my feedback, I don't know how to give it to you. Does that make sense? So I'm going to go ahead and call this one yellow for me. Tell us more about your rating for the Mystic Arts, the yellow rating here. So I'm going to say, I like this subclass in theory. However, I think it's lacking in a few areas. It feels like it should have an additional level 3 feature. Because right now, all it gets at level 3 is its spellcasting, which is fine, but every other kind of third caster in the Eldritch Knight and the Arcane Trickster get spellcasting and then another thing. Some of them more useful than others, but you don't get anything else. Now, maybe part of the reason why was because monks get a bunch of cool stuff at 3rd level, but I think it would be worth, giving them something. And honestly, one of the most simple ones might be taking Centered Focus, the level 11 ability, and moving it to level 3, because while Centered Focus is nice, it's a always-on passive ability when you're utilizing these features. What concentration spells are you casting? Especially as you get to higher levels, I feel like the amount of concentration spells you may be casting, and maybe the reason they put it at level 11 is because coming up at level 13, you could cast Haste on yourself. But I feel like this is like a very simple passive ability that I don't think is game-breaking to have at level 3. Because it is still tied to your monk abilities. It is still tied to a resource expenditure in a focus point. And then that frees up level 11 to do something cool. But, okay, so what were we saying? We were saying, I like this subclass in theory. However, I think it's lacking in a few areas. It feels like it should have an additional level 3 feature. The level 11 feature is okay, but lacking in any wow factor, I guess. Additionally, the level 17 feature is basically a direct copy of the Eldritch Knight level 17 feature, or level 18 feature. Feature. I'll put in parentheses level 18. And is useless as written. I think there's definite room for improvement, and this class deserves to appear in a future book. See, the other side of it is the original 2014 Four Elements monk felt like it kind of dealt with this a little bit by allowing them to do a lot of spell casting with their, in 2014, key points. I'm going to say I like the spell casting feature when we get to the individual features here. I'm going to say, sorry, let me go back to my point about the 2014 Four Elements. It had, it could cast spells, but it could only cast those spells with key points. And often the expenditure for the spell that it lets you cast didn't feel like a great trade-off. So they obviously went very different direction with the 2024 Four Elements monk, and I think it's significantly stronger for it. So this is kind of filling in that sort of spellcasting monk niche, and there's not really a ton of options if we're trying to keep third casters to marshals that don't have access to spellcasting, right? Because obviously rangers and paladins are half casters. So we gave the rogue and the fighter a magic class. So now we're giving the monk a magic class. The only one that doesn't fit that could possibly have that would be a barbarian. Would be that, and it obviously doesn't feel like that fits too well in its current form, given the fact that rage doesn't allow you to cast spells. So that would sort of kind of be the opposite of it, unless you develop something like a rage mage, which does allow it to overwrite the capability of rage, not allowing it to cast spells. But I don't think we're at a point design-wise where that's something they're looking to do. I think the closest we're going to get is probably like the wild magic barbarian, but either way. So for spellcasting, I like it. I think it functions fine. It functions, the way it's supposed to. Mystic Focus at level 6. This is essentially giving you the sorcerer's ability to convert spell slots or sorcery points into spell slots and vice versa. This is essentially the same thing, but with focus points only for expended spells, but you do get your focus points back on a short rest. So while you do have a limited number of spell slots, more often than not, you should be able to recharge them to some degree. I think I like it as it is. I'm going to go ahead and choose that I do like it. And then also at level 6, you get the Mystic Fighting Style. When you take the attack action on your turn, you can replace one of the attacks with a casting of a sorcerer cantrip. Now this is fine, because it's when you take the attack action, which at level 6 you have 2 attacks. So you're going to replace one of those attacks with the casting of a cantrip. So you could hit one time with an unarmed strike, fire off a cantrip, potentially a cantrip that obviously level 6 is going to do a couple of d6s or d8s or whatever it might be. Sorceress Burst would probably be your ideal one here because of the way it works. And then you could still follow up with your bonus action with a Flurry of Blows and do a couple of extra hits, or just your bonus action martial arts strike. So I think Mystic Fighting Style is fine. It also follows the trend of things like the Valor Bard and things like the Eldritch Knight. Now, level 11. As I've stated, I think the feature is fine, but it's just kind of blah. Like, it doesn't really wow me. It doesn't do anything super cool. It's good to have because it allows you to give yourself concentration until advantage on concentration, but you need to be in a situation where you are concentrating on a spell and then also expending focus points to do one of these 3 things. Reminder that in 2024, base usage of things like Patient Defense and Step of the Wind, they don't require you to expend a focus point to dash or disengage. You can do those without expending any points. Obviously, if you want to do the upgraded version, that's dash and disengage, or disengage and dodge. Those do require point usage, and then obviously Flurry of Blows does to use at any time. But there's a lot of riders that need to happen for this to be a beneficial ability. And more often than not, like, unless you're out of focus points, like, what are the spells you're going to do? I mean, there are obviously some good spell options, right? Shield is always useful as a reflexive option, but you also have deflect attacks, so that might be a better move for you, depending on the situation. Mirror Image is very good. It'll give you that shadow clone sort of vibe, and that's very useful, but that's not concentration. Haste would be an option, I guess, because that would give you another strike, and you would have advantage on losing that. That would probably be the best example, in my opinion, but you don't even unlock the ability to cast 3rd level spells until level 13. And lastly, so for rating, I guess that's why I'm putting it as yellow, and level 17 is terrible. And I covered this twice in both of my previous videos, but I'll cover it again here. It's useless as it's written, because they basically directly ported this over from the Eldritch Knight, and it says when you take the attack action on your turn, meaning your action, not your bonus action Flurry of Blows attacks, which are not quantified as an attack action, that is Flurry of Blows. When you take the attack action on your turn, which as a monk, you only have 2 attacks from extra attack at level 5, you could replace both of those attacks to cast a level 1 or level 2 sorcerer spell with a casting time of an action. You know what is also a level 1 or 2 sorcerer spell, that casting time of an action? The magic action, which would be you taking that anyway. So you could take the magic action to cast a spell of any level that you could cast as your action, and then still do something like Flurry of Blows. So there is no reason to have this as written. If it was written in such a way that it said it allowed you to replace any 2 attacks with a casting of a spell, that might be better, because with Flurry of Blows at level 17, you can make a total of 5 strikes. So you could nix 2 of those to cast a spell and then still have 3 strikes left. However, what's the benefit of that? Whereas you could cast the spell as a magic action of any level and then still follow up with 3 unarmed strikes with Flurry of Blows. So you're effectively doing the same thing, just without having, like, what is the downside or the benefit? It's not letting you break turn order. It's not letting you cast a spell that was an action as a bonus action. It's still casting time of an action. So you might as well just use the magic action to cast a spell, because at level 17, you could cast 3rd level spells, and coming up at level 19, you'll be able to cast 4th level spells. So, again, reminder that in 2024, you don't need to take the attack action to follow up with a bonus action 1 single strike or, Flurry of Blows. Your bonus action unarmed strike or Flurry of Blows are just allowing you to do those as a bonus action. There is no thing that you don't need to take the attack action first to then do those. You can just do those. And there's no order in which you take them. You could do those first and then follow up with a spell after the fact. So if you're going to do this, there's no reason for this feature to exist. Just cast the spell as a magic action and then do whatever you want as your bonus action. So, again, I see what they were going for. The reason that this is beneficial for a fighter is a fighter at level 17 has 3 attacks on its attack action. It also has action surge to get more attacks for an attack action. And at level 20, it has a total of 4 attacks. So it's beneficial for the fighter because they can still make attacks and then supplement a leveled spell in there if they want. That's why it works for them and not for the monk. So for this one, I'm going to go ahead and rate this one red. All right, moving on. Okay, so I wish I clicked to the next link, because now it's giving me the opportunity to comment literally everything I just said. So you know what? Pause for a sec. I'm going to write out all of the things I literally just said to you guys instead of having you listen to me type them all out and rewrite them. Okay, so we typed out everything that we just said. Let's go ahead and click next. At least now we know the format. So, have I playtested the Oath of the Spellguard? No. How do I feel about the Oath of the Spellguard Paladin? Okay. I like it, but I think it needs some tweaks. Again, where do we fall on tweaks, right? I think I'm gonna vote this one yellow. And I'm going to say I like a lot of the functionality. However, I believe it's a little too heavy on reaction economy and also very dependent on enemies that cast spells. I think that's reasonable, right? So let's go ahead and take a look at the features. So we have Guardian Bond, which we've talked about is effectively a shield. I'm going to rate that as yellow because I think it needs a couple simple tweaks, but I don't know. Is that a simple tweak or is that I don't know. Or would you call what I'm asking a significant change? That's my problem, because what I'm saying when I look at this, and I will save this discussion for the next little bit, but it effectively gives you a bonus to AC seemingly for the triggering attack, unlike shield, which would last until the start of your next turn. Feels like the protection fighting style might be better. Does changing that to last until the start of your next turn, is that a significant change or is that a tweak? I'm going to vote it as green, and you know what? And we'll call it a tweak. I like the spells. We're going to call that a green as well. Aura of Concentration or Spellguard Strike as well. Another level 3 option, which is a reactionary strike to somebody casting a spell. I think that's fine. Aura of Concentration, I also think that that's fine. That is effectively giving everybody advantage on Constitution saving throws. Spell-breaking blade, I think, is fine as well. And honestly, I think the abilities are all fine. It's the overall hierarchy of the design that I think needs the tweaking. It's not the individual features. It's just how they all are sort of reliant on, you know, the certain outside forces. And then honestly, I do think level 20 is fine. So I'm going to vote all of this. Is weird because I'm voting the class yellow, but I'm voting all of the features green. So let's go ahead and talk about the features. So I'm going to write that I think Guardian Bond needs a tweak to have the functionality work like the shield spell. With the current updates to the protection, or with the 2024 update to the protection fighting style, it feels like that is the better option for defending your allies as allies, because as written, Guardian Bond only protects against the triggering strike and not subsequent attacks. Okay. Oath of the Spellguard spells, I think those are fine. No concerns. Spellguard Strike. I think it's great to have reactionary attacks outside of traditional opportunity attacks as a paladin. However, with the spell options, say, was it shield, counterspell? What other options did they give them? Shield and counterspell, those are the main ones. Shield, counterspell, yeah. Shield, counterspell. I worry that several of these features all are dependent on your reaction or concentration. Works fine as intended. See my issues regarding Spellguard Strike. Once again, this whole feature, and to some extent this class, is heavily based on you interacting with enemy spellcasters. It feels similar to how Mage Slayer, how the Mage Slayer feat is. You need to know what game you're going to be in and whether or not your abilities will be of any use. Again, that's not really a function or an issue of the subclass. It's a very, I thought part of our goal with 2014, with 5e in general, specifically 2024, was to try and break things up a little bit from like the hyper specific. And I want to make it very clear that I don't have an issue with hyper specific subclasses. I come from the world of D&D 3.5, where you could get as hyper specific on a very minute thing you wanted to, and that could become your whole identity. And that's fine by me. But it feels like we're trying to keep things a little bit more broad strokes so that they're applicable sort of all around, as opposed to like, hey, this is a very specific subclass designed for a very specific task. Now, if you know you're going to be going into a game where it's like enemy spellcaster, the campaign, then this might make more sense than, say, an Ancients Paladin or a Devotion Paladin, right? That's something you would need to know. Again, not an issue of the subclass, just something to be considered about how hyper-specific its functionality is. Because if you look at the other, I guess probably to some degree, except for the Magic Stealer, but even then, it has a lot of functionality that works outside of having to fight enemy spellcasters. A lot of these other like arcane classes and these mystic classes, they're just cool things that let you do a thing. They're not dependent on fighting an enemy so that your abilities are there to counter them. They work separate from that. Whereas this one is very much dependent on you being able to shut down enemy attacks. Like the level 3 Spellguard Strike and the level 15 spell Breaking Blade are basically offensive counter spells. That's what they're there to do. And you know, even the Magic Stealer, like I said, when we look through its functionality, has stuff that it can use without enemies needing to cast spells. Even if allies are casting spells, it can help you to some degree. And Eternal Spellguard, it's just an improvement to anybody within your aura of protection. So, I'm going to say no issues. Because it's good, you know, it just boosts your aura of protection. No issues. Moving on to the next. The Magic Stealer. Have I playtested it? No. It is green, and I'm going to flat out say, I think this is one of the best designed subclasses you've made. It's just a bummer that it has such a terrible name. I feel like Spell Thief is right there. I know it's the name of the level 17 arcane trickster feature, but I feel like you should just use it. Maybe spell Siphon. Maybe Arcane Siphon. Maybe Arcane Thief. Just not Magic Stealer. Magic Stealer. Please. I'm going to give these greens across the board because I know I like them, and then we'll talk about them in the next little bit here. So, empowered sneak attack, as we've talked about in previous videos, it's when a creature you can see within 30 feet of you casts a spell, you can siphon, and you're not even actually siphoning the power, you're just using that to empower your sneak attack. So it's not just when enemies cast a spell, you can utilize this off of your allies casting a spell. And you're going to basically get a number of d6s equal to the spell's level. You can add those force damage d6s to your sneak attack, and you could do this intelligence modifier times per long rest. So if you're playing with, say you're level 3, and your ally casts the second level spell, you can use your reaction to give yourself an extra 2d6 of force damage sneak attack when you go to trigger your sneak attack, as long as you do so before the end of your next turn. Again, you have the limited uses of intelligence modifier times per long rest, but you're able to fire this off and use it. So it's not unlike the Spellguard Paladin, which requires you to have an enemy that's casting magic for its abilities to work, you can use this off of enemies or allies, which is nice. So you can have the opportunity to do so as long as the spell is a leveled spell and not like a cantrip. It doesn't say that it needs to be cast with a spell slot either, so this can function off an ally utilizing a magic item to cast a spell. It's just as long as the spell being cast has a level associated with it, so it doesn't obviously, again, work on cantrips. But if your barbarian is not raging and fires off a wand of fireballs, that's a level 3 spell, so you can pull 3d6 from that. So very, very cool in that respect. And again, the dice are just dice added to the pool. So if you crit, those dice do double. So I think I'm going to go ahead and say I really love this this feature, especially because it can work off of allies casting spells. I just wish somehow later on it could possibly get this ability back on a short rest, or maybe some usages back on a short rest. That's my only real kind of nitpick with it, is it's kind of the cool thing you can do, but you're very limited in how many times you can do it. All right, level 3 is Drain Magic. I also really like this one. So as a magic action, you can touch a willing creature and end an ongoing level 1 or level 2 spell on it. It immediately recovers 1 spell slot of level 2 or lower, once per short or long rest. So again, we've talked about this. This can be used to sort of refund a spell slot. If somebody casts a spell like Bless, and let's say the combat ends before you can get the full usage out of Bless, you can say, oh, let me end that spell on you real quick and refund you a level 1 or 2 spell slot. As I've stated a bunch, it is limited to short or long rest, so it's 1 usage, so it's not a ton of times, but you also can use this to end an ongoing spell that was cast maybe as a ritual to refund a 2nd level spell slot. So let's say the wizard go ahead and casts Detect Magic as a ritual, which doesn't expend a spell slot. You could then end their Detect Magic as a action and grant them back a 2nd level spell slot, because it states expended spell slot of level 2 or lower, the target's choice. So it doesn't have to be the spell slot of the spell you ended. So you ended a level 1 spell, you can grant back a 2nd level spell slot, which is a pretty cool thing. It has a lot of neat functionality there. So let's go ahead and I really like this feature as well. It has a bunch of utility, and that it can... Oh, and I didn't even mention that you could use it to end a negative debuffing spell on an ally. So let's say your ally gets hit with Bane, Fairy Fire, Slow. You could end that spell on them as an action, which, as a rogue, you normally aren't going to have access to things like Counterspell, Dispel Magic, Lesser Restoration, whatever the case might be, to end one of these spells, remove Curse, whatever it is. So as long as it's an ongoing spell that provides this debuff, you could end that spell on them and then grant them a spell slot back on top of that. So not even like I talked about refunding an expended spell that they're using to give them the usage back. You can also use this as a utility to combat offensive enemy spells, which is really cool. A bunch of utility, and then it can help refund expended or accidentally used spells for the party, but also to end potentially debuffing / offensive enemy spells while granting boons to an ally as well. So I really, really like that. I also didn't realize that I moved this. So here we go. All right, level 9, Magical Sabotage. This is one of the best usage for Cunning Strike, and I'm actually going to go ahead and write that. This is hands down the best Cunning Strike options going, because you get 3 usage. And again, as a reminder, the way Cunning Strike is when you take a sneak attack, you can sacrifice d6s off of your sneak attack in favor of doing other things. So you can sacrifice 2d6 to grant disadvantage on the next saving throw that target makes against a spell until the start of your next turn. And remember, the only thing that needs to happen for Cunning Strike to happen is you hit somebody with sneak attack. So potentially, if an ally, let's say, has a means of helping you generate an attack off of turn order, not because you obviously can only sneak attack once on your turn, but you could sneak attack separately as a reaction or something. So you could do that outside of traditional turn order to then maybe even they could do something where they're setting you up to set them up because you're now granting disadvantage on the next saving throw against a spell, and now the party member can follow up with maybe some big save or suck spell. So you've got that. You have Disrupt spell. So it's whenever a target starts casting a spell, you hit them with this, and then they've got this sort of debuff on them until the start of your next turn. Whenever that target goes to cast a spell during that time, from the time you hit them till the start of their next turn, they need to make an intelligence saving throw. And if they fail the saving throw, the spell dissipates with no effect, and whatever action economy was used to cast said spell, it is wasted. You could hit somebody with this, and then your barbarian comes in with a big swing or something, and they go to cast shield. Well, the reaction would be expended, and the spell would fizzle. Now, it says if that spell was cast with a spell slot, the slot isn't expended, and as I've been trying to drive home to everybody, in the world of 2024, enemy monsters and NPCs as written in the books do not have spell slots, they have spell usages. So in doing so, you're basically burning their ability to cast that spell unless it's something like an at-will spell. So this is a great debuff. It's effectively an offensive delay time counterspell, which is great. And it's not like they're making a con save. It's an intelligence saving throw, which unless it's a wizard, may be pretty difficult for them. And lastly, for sacrificing 2d6, it's steel resistance, which is you are basically unlike something like Elemental Adept, which lets you overcome an enemy's resistance to a specific damage type, you are taking that resistance from them entirely, which means until the start of your next turn, both you and your allies are able to hit them with something that they are able to take now full damage from. Where, like, imagine you have a whole team of fire-based users, and there's an enemy you're coming up against. They don't have Elemental Adept yet, but the enemy they're fighting has fire resistance. You could hit them with your sneak attack, not only remove the resistance, allowing your party to now hit for full power, you also gain that resistance to fire damage until the start of your next turn. So this is very, very tactically, again, on top of the other usages of Cunning Strike that you have from just base rogue. And again, at higher levels, you're allowed to apply multiple instances of Cunning Strike on one hit. And the nice other thing is Empower Sneak Attack allows you to maybe offset you lowering your sneak attack damage by a little bit for Cunning Strike by allowing you to offset it with extra empowered sneak attack force dice from using your reaction for that. So there's a lot of interesting interplay between the features that allows you to you might effectively lose no damage overall by the fact that you can empower your sneak attack. So, the best usage of Cunning Strike options going. I also like that you can offset the damage reduction by previously activating Empower Sneak Attack. All right, level 13 is Occult Shroud. Whenever you finish a long rest, you can cast the non-detection spell using intelligence as your spellcasting ability. When you do so, you target only yourself, and the duration increases to 24 hours. Again, that's great. I think that that's fine. There's no issue with that. It's just upon ending the long rest, you're able to do this. So in theory, it will have 0 lapse in its capability, which means you can effectively hide yourself from prying, scrying eyes for 24 hours constantly. And this is just kind of an always on thing. Maybe this isn't as beneficial as an option to other people as it might be, because it's only if you're worried about being spied on by enemies who have means of magical scrying. But this is something you'll be able to constantly do. I guess the concept is you could potentially, maybe this isn't as powerful, but it's okay because not only does Occult Shroud come online at level 13, you also get improved Drain Magic, which I think is part of the issue we talked about with the level 11 ability for the Way of the Martial Arts Monk. It got that, always advantage on con saves when you spend a focus point. Like, that feels similar in power to Occult Shroud, but it's okay because you also get a more active ability in improved Drain Magic. So if it was only Occult Shroud, I'd say, okay, maybe that's a little on the weaker side, but because it comes with improved Drain Magic, that I think works out well. And so improved Drain Magic is when you use your Drain Magic feature from level 3, you now can do it as a bonus action instead of an action. And you can now end one ongoing level 1, 2, or 3 spell on the target, and the target recovers 1 expended spell slot of level 3 or lower. So again, this is not going to allow you to end, you could say something like Hold Person is a very, very powerful offensive spell where, you're going to basically paralyze somebody to queue up auto crits. Level 3 is where you'd get something like Slow, so you could end that and then, grant them a spell slot back of level 3 or lower. And the function still works from Drain Magic, where you could do, like I said, somebody casts a ritual spell of like Detect Magic. Now you could end their level 1 spell and grant them a level 3 slot back. So I'm going to say this is a great passive ability, especially since it's not the only ability you get at level 13. Improved Drain Magic. This is just, I'm going to say the name is apt, as it does exactly what it should do, which is improve Drain Magic. And lastly, we have Eldritch Implosion at 17. When you use Empower Sneak Attack, that option, you can force the target to make a con save. Now, this is the offensive version of it. As we talked about earlier, Empower Sneak Attack can work on allies or enemies. This, with Eldritch Implosion, you could choose, and it says you can force, which means you don't have to do it every time, but you could force them to make a con save, and if they fail that con save when you use Empower Sneak Attack, that spell that they were casting dissipates, and they're stunned until the start of its next turn. So you are effectively combining Stunning Strike with Counterspell while also empowering Sneak Attack at the same time. So I could also understand why, based on this, they don't have a means to have Empower Sneak Attack come back with some other functionality. The only thing I would do, and I don't think, actually having looked through everything again, I don't think there's a reason to have it come back on a short rest. But like, maybe it's an early, I don't know when it would come on, but essentially if you drop an enemy to 0 hit points, let's say, maybe something like this, if you drop an enemy to 0 hit points with an empowered sneak attack, it refunds 1 usage of it. That might be a thing. So that it's not like it's an always on thing, and it's obviously also encouraging you to use Empower Sneak Attack. And if maybe that's a level 17 additional feature as part of Eldritch Implosion, if you kill a creature, or maybe if Eldritch Implosion, right, if you use it and they do fail the con save, it doesn't expend the usage of Empowered Sneak Attack or something. I don't know. I just feel like maybe if there's an option to get it back, or maybe this might be something your DM lets you spend a feat on, or gives you a cool magic item that lets you get a usage back or something. Or if you critically hit on an Empowered Sneak Attack, then it refunds a usage or something like that. You know what I mean? So that you're, and I guess the other side of it is, right, normally I would say, like, that's your whole thing. That's what your whole subclass is designed around. So you want to be able to do it more often, which is always my issue with, like, Arcane Archer. but your subclass can do so many cool things. Not one aspect is the thing you can do. So, I'm going to say I really like that this upgrades the level 3 feature and turns it into a offensive option if you want to. Okay, there. Lastly, we have the Vestige Patron Warlock. I'm going to say no, I did not get a chance to play test it. And, I mean, I think overall, I think I'm going to put this as green. And I'm going to say my only tweak would be that it doesn't really work with the Pact of the Chain / investment chain invocations. But as long as the player is aware of that going in, there's no real issue. And I covered this extensively in my previous video where I went over this. But the other side of it is you do have this cool stat block, your Vestige Companion, right? This is, you essentially have a magical companion. It has its own stat block here. It can do its own thing. It goes after you, and you basically spend your bonus action to command it to do stuff. And it has a couple different options based on what you choose. What it can do, it can heal, it can teleport, it can impose disadvantage. And the nice thing about the undead version of imposing disadvantage that it can do is there's no saving throw with that. It just does it. And like I said, one of the only other thing is that depending on if you were to take Pact of the Chain and Investment of the Chain as those kind of invocations, there are options that might be slightly stronger than your Vestige Companion, although it might not have as much hit points, because the Vestige Companion does get 4 + 4 times your Warlock level, so at higher levels it will be significantly stronger. But the biggest thing I'd say it probably has to compete with is something like the Sphinx of Wonder, which does a sizable chunk of damage for a familiar, and with Investment of the Chain, you can do that as a bonus action every turn. Now that again, so you couldn't really truly do both unless you sacrificed one of your attacks to have either this or that companion attack. So there's ways you could do both, especially if you focus on Pact of the Blade, so you're able to get more attacks. But either way, I think the Vestige Companion aspect is fine. I like a pet class, so I'm down for that. I also really like the Vestige spells, where they're basically you pick a cleric domain. Now, it does limit the cleric domain to life, light, trickery, or war. So I would love to see if it had an expansion beyond just the ones that are in the player's handbook. Like if this just read, select a cleric domain, period, so that you could choose of that, like it future-proofs it for other cleric domains that may come out in a future time. Like if this ends up in a book with a cleric domain, wouldn't it be good to have it work with the stuff from the new book, right? So again, I know they limited it to life, light, trickery, and war because those are the 2024 player's handbook domains, but I would future-proof it and just let it do anything. But that also lets you focus heavily on the sort of god you want this vestige tied to, and it also helps direct which way your spellcasting goes, right? So if you were to choose life domain, that's now going to give you access to a ton of healing spells, which you normally wouldn't have access to as a warlock. Light's going to give you a lot of big AoE damage spells. War is going to give you single target things and things like Spirit Guardians and Spiritual Weapon. Trickery is going to give you a lot of utility and like invisibility and you know, the sneaking kind of stuff. So it lets you determine what way you want to play your warlock, which is nice because it offers that degree of versatility. So I'm also going to say that that's green. Vestige Recovery is, it now regains its divine power on a short or long rest. I think that's fine. It is kind of only okay. So I think that could use a tweak in the way that it could maybe give him another level 6 feature to kind of make up for the fact that this one's kind of only okay. Aura of Power I'm going to vote for green. and then I think I'm going to write Semblance of Life also green, so we can go ahead and jump ahead to filling these out. So again, as I said, Vestige Companion. My only issue is its competition with Pact of the Chain Familiars, and how some of them may be stronger overall. I would expand this to include any cleric domain of your choice. Vestige Recovery, this is fine. However, it's very limited in scope. Perhaps there should be another level 6 feature. Again, because it's, as we mentioned, that your Vestige Companion gets these 3 bonus actions a day, once a day, and it's Cursed Invocation, the disadvantage on attack rolls, the Teleport, swapping places, and the Healing Touch that ends 1 condition. Those are all good, but you obviously need to be in a, I don't know how good Fiendish Swap is going to be, because you're swapping places with it. In theory, you're going to want this thing to maybe be up and doing attacking or something. I don't know how you're going to work it, but all it does is essentially grant you that what was previously a once-a-day ability. It is now once per short or long rest, or when you activate your Magical Cunning feature. That's cool, but it also is, very limited in its scope. Again, I guess you will be probably taking a lot of short rests as a Warlock, so maybe it's not that limited. But I feel like maybe you could add a little something or do a little something else. Aura of Power, you're better than a Paladin. Your Vestige is better than a Paladin when it comes to auras that it can generate. It gets a level 30-foot aura emanation, about like 7 or 8 levels faster than the Paladin does. It grants triple damage resistance, as well as immunity to 2 conditions. This is effectively taking away several aspects of both the Ancients and the Devotion Paladin. All Paladins grant a aura that gives immunity to Frightened at level 10. The Devotion Paladin grants a immunity to Charmed at level 7. And I think the Ancients Paladin grants resistance to like Psychic, Radiant, Necrotic damage, or Psychic Force and Necrotic damage or something. 3 damage type of resistance. You're granting resistance to Fire, Necrotic, and Radiant. Fire and Necrotic being very common from enemy creatures. And immunity to Charm and Frighten. So it's granting all 5 of those things. 2 condition immunities and 3 damage resistances as a magic action in a 30-foot emanation from your Vestige. Charisma modifier charisma hours per long rest. So again, while the Paladin does get to generate those things all the time, you do have a limited usage of this. Granted, you could do it for 10 hours by the time you get this feature, which would cover probably a pretty large portion of your adventuring day if it's going to cover your 10 hours, right? Like you wake up in the morning, you set out, activate this aura, it's going to be up for 10 hours. It's going to cover most of your day. And on top of all of that, when it if you drop to 0 hit points, you can basically dissipate your Vestige if you're within the aura. So it can't come back until you finish a long rest, but it also gives you a Death Ward style effect. And I'm going to say this is better than most Paladins of this level. And then Semblance of Life is this option where basically you supercharge your Vestige Companion to function as either the Summon Celestial, Summon Fiend, or Summon Undead spell. And it is cast at a level equal to half your Warlock level. So upon gaining this, it's cast at level 7, which is pretty strong. And its duration shrinks to 1 minute. All I'm going to say is, was this supposed to not be concentration? Most other abilities that allow for a special casting of a summon spell shorten the duration to 1 minute, and also remove concentration. So that's my other thing, is there's just several options out there where you can cast a summon spell, and instead of it taking its hour or whatever, 10 minutes, whatever its concentration duration is, it drops it down to a minute, so significantly shorter, but it removes the concentration, and that's sort of the trade-off. It feels like that's probably what this was supposed to be, but because ultimately you're going to do your cool thing where you supercharge your companion, then you get hit, knocked out of concentration, and it's over with. So, all right, next. What do we got here? Where are you from? Well, I am from the United States. Okay. What is your, where is it? Your racial or ethnic heritage? What's your gender? That's it. So I'm going to go ahead and hit submit. And that is the survey. Sorry that took a long time. It took, oh my God, a whole hour. But that is just me wanting to make sure I do this thoroughly. And I hope you all take the time to submit your own feedback as well, as we can't help impact the future of the game unless we all tell them how we feel about these things. All in all, I will say I think this Unearthed Arcana overall was a big hit. I think a lot of people seem to really like a lot of the options that were introduced in this for a variety of different reasons. I've seen a lot of people are big fans of the monk, big fans of the warlock. As I've stated, and you can probably tell from this video, I'm a biggest fan of the rogue. But the fact that there are so many different people, creators and otherwise, that are feel so strongly about the different options in here, I think are really great, because that means that they're doing something right, and they're also branching out and trying different things. And in doing so, that means they're hitting all of the, finding what sticks, what things resonate well with people. So I don't know. Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. I'll see you all next time.